And we are back with our Philly.net after show here at the Microsoft Malvern MTC studio. I'm Chris Gomez, and I've got Rich Ross with me. Tonight, we're just going to talk a little bit about what we saw at the hands-on lab tonight. And as you saw in the stream title, examine a new C# 8 feature. And then there's a couple jumping off points. We'll see where the conversation goes. Don't know. That's what's fun about it, is to see if we can capture the spontaneous conversation after a user group meetup. So how's it going tonight, Rich?
Doing well. It's been a long day, but it's a good day.
Yeah, so. And we had a pretty cool hands-on lab where Bill really took everyone on a tour of ASP.NET Core. And I felt there was a lot of talk about what's current and what's coming.
Right.
And hopefully that was clear to everyone watching. It might I'll watch the replay on our YouTube channel to make sure I have everything down correctly. But it was pretty comprehensive.
Yeah, he'd gone through a number of, soup to nuts, and I know some of the questions we're getting down into, some of the technical stuff around some of the things that are very different in previous versions of projects and stuff.
Right, and thanks to the folks in the audience who asked us questions tonight. Again, we had some great questions to clarify, what is launch settings.json in our new world, because I think if you've done ASP.NET, whether it's web forms or MVC or web API on .NET Framework, web config's been a mainstay for a very long time, and that's just not how things work in .NET Core anymore, because web config is very much an IIS thing.
Yeah.
And in our new world, in our .NET Core world, we don't just support IIS. We run in Windows. You could run on Windows. You could use Nginx on Windows if you wanted. You could use I'm pretty sure the docs show Apache Tomcat as well, and you could also be running on Linux or a Mac. So it's a pretty exciting time, I think, to be a developer, to know that you can work on the platform you like, on the OS you like, and output to the platform and OS you like at the same time. So
do you want to pause right there?
Yeah.
I'm looking at the live stream, and it went to the old stream, not the new stream. So we can count, or we can keep going.
Okay, so you think it went to? Oh, I see what you're saying.
It's saying the ASP.NET beforehand is what's live now, not.
Yeah, like it got confused with the event.
Yep. We let it go. I think.
Yeah.
They'll see the live now.
We'll fix the video. We'll fix up the video metadata, I think, afterward.
Yeah.
Because there are a couple things I want to include in tonight's metadata when we talk about C# 8. So if you see this on YouTube, we have the opportunity. This is going to be recorded, and it'll be on the YouTube channel at youtube.com/PhillyDotNet. And what's nice is there's a couple blog posts that I'm going to want to point out. I want to make sure that you have those. I guess even another place to look at is, I think, Bill, tonight on my laptop, I've just got a quick link to the GitHub ASP.NET sample site. And it's really easy to get to. It's github.com/ASP.NET/samples. And that's where he got everything that he worked on. So, this is a great place to go and basically check things out to get started. So it was really interesting. It was kind of like both hands-on. He was walking people through stuff. But in next month, we're going to look at other things that are coming in .NET Core 3.
Yep.
We're going to be looking at the .NET Desktop support. The WPF and WinForms are coming in .NET Core 3. And then we're also going to take a quick peek at C# 8 features.
Yeah.
And since I'm working on that, I figured, okay, well, what if we took a look at one of these? If you want to do that now, we can take a look at a new feature in C# 8. It has to do with patterns.
Okay.
So C# 8 has a lot more. There's a lot more expressive ways to maybe do things in code that we used to write a lot of, maybe verbose ifs and tests and so on. And so what's interesting is I was looking at Mads Torgenson's blog post, Do More with Patterns in C# 8.0, and one of these really struck me looking at the property patterns and something called a recursive pattern. So I said, well, what if we had a sample?
Mm-hmm.
So I have this sample app here. It's just a console app. Make the font a little bit larger there. And I said, okay, well, what if let's just say maybe we got this from a database, or maybe we, in this case, it's just hard coded. I've got this students array, and but this could be return value from a database or something like that. And if we go just take a quick peek at what these student values are, I'm using some C# support we've had a long time, object property initializers, right? Where I'm basically saying, hey, create me a new student, and a student apparently it owns a type called name, which encapsulates both the first and last name. Might be some interesting reason for that later. They're both just strings, and then a student has an enrollment year and a major, which is also just a string. Nothing too special. So we have this list. It's not too important where the list came from there. Just I think what's more important is that if you wanted to query this code previously, you can get the code back up on screen.
Where'd you go? Sorry.
That's all right. Oh, and then it's really zoomed in.
Yeah, hang on.
We'll get that.
There's you.
Yeah, that's me. And then this is the screen that we'll get in just a second. So.
Oh, you're on 3. That's why, not 8. There you go.
Yeah, so in the past, if you got back some kind of collection like this, you might write this for each to go over it, right? You might say, I really only need the students whose major is chemistry and their enrollment year is 2018, so your code might look like this. You might for each over the students and say, let me do this test. And and then after, if they pass the test, I will add them to this larger list of students that I'm keeping. I created a new list, and then we're adding to it. Now I put that one second. Some folks might like LINQ, and I'll admit that was the first thing I reached for. I reached for LINQ, and so I said, okay, well, what if I said that students? What if I use the where clause in students and say, okay, I want to see the students where their major is chemistry and where their enrollment year is 2018. And then the reason why I set that to list is because that allows me, once it's a list, is I can just simply write them out. I've got this helper function down here that lets me write out the students very quickly. So if I do those two things, just those two things, let's run this, and I'm going to get identical result. I probably should make this a little bit bigger, right? Okay. And then let's see. The other one, we obviously don't want this yet. So let's get this out of the way too. You can see when you prep for one of these things. All right, let's run that again. We should get the same results. And the reason why we get the same results is because essentially in for each style, we searched for chemistry majors from enrollment year 2018, and a LINQ style, a for each style, pretty much the same, no differences there. And if we really wanted to, we could go through this list and we could confirm that, hey, we do have some chemistry majors that aren't enrollment year 2018, so they weren't going to show up. But basically anybody who is chemistry and enrollment year 2018, that shows up just fine. So let's talk about this new way that we can filter in C#8 using patterns. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead. You just saw me comment this out earlier, but let's bring it back in. In this version, we're going to go over the same list of students, but the difference is I'm still going to use a for each. But let's take a look at how the code has changed. Here what I'm saying is if a student is, and the is keyword is used, and then you put in bracket, you put what looks a little bit like an object initializer, but not quite, because it doesn't say major equals. It's using major and a colon. And then you just put after it what it should be evaluated against. And so if a student is a student that meets these qualifications, their major field is set to chemistry and their enrollment year is set to 2018, then we're going to add them to the list. So comparing that to just a little bit above, where we say if the student's major is chemistry, this is traditional looking code, traditional imperative looking if code that we're all used to writing. It probably, I'm sure it looks very familiar to a lot of people, but down in the C#8 section, which might have frozen, the NDI might have frozen in the C#8.
You're not coming through?
Yeah, at least I'm not seeing the screen. I see me, or I did see me.
Bring you back up here. Hang on. There you go. We'll be there by yourself.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, so it's still on us, but
Yeah.
oh, it isn't. Oh,
oh, I'm gonna turn right back. Hang on. How's that?
okay. Yep, it's moving again. So this pattern syntax allows me to pretty concisely say if a student is and it meets these expression qualifications, then let's go ahead and add them to the list, right? So what you're going to see is when I go ahead and run this again is now I have 3 identical sets, because the old LINQ style way combined with the for each style way combined with this for each style filter get the same result. So then I decided, well, I want to dig into this a little bit more and say, okay, let's go take a look at what a student looks like. A student derives from a person, and a person has a name. So what that means is, how would I perhaps filter on a little bit more on a student's name? Let's say maybe their last name. Let me look at this list right here. What if I really only want the Linda Crown?
Mm-hmm.
Well, in C#8, I can do that. I can say, okay, this is called a recursive pattern. So I have a pattern here where I'm saying you can match a student on whether their major is chemistry, their enrollment year is 2018. But if I go ahead and I add another set of braces and I say that their name, well, actually, no, I don't want to add the braces yet. Sorry. First, I need to say name. If their name is, and now I add another set of braces and I say that their last name is Crown, just because I remember seeing that in the list. This is called a recursive pattern because now I've put a pattern within a pattern.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying that you not only have to be a student whose major is chemistry, the enrollment year is 2018, but that your name, last name field has to be Crown in order to get into this list. So now when I run, I should only see one result down there in the 3rd section, the C#8 style list, and here it is, just Linda Crown. So
that's pretty cool.
Kind of a concise way that I actually think reads pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you've read a lot of this code, you know, I could do the same thing or something very similar, but you can get into this very easily. You can get into this place where you're lots of ands and ors, and you've almost got to become a human compiler and go, now if they equal chemistry and they equal enrollment year, and whereas the idea behind this is to be very concise, right?
Yeah.
So just go ahead.
Being made in the chat room is by Skull Crusher is basically saying that this looks very MongoDB-ish, and,
right,
and the way they do their clausing.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Right. So there's pattern matching syntax does look a lot like that, and you know, if you used LINQ, this reads pretty well too. And so I was playing around with this, and I wanted to say let's see how far this goes.
Okay.
And so I'd be curious. I'm not saying that this isn't supported. All I'm saying is I couldn't figure this out.
Right.
So that's what we're here for. Is so I said, now in my list of candidates here, I've got those several last names. In fact, let's look at the last one. This Jackson Portents student doesn't have a last name that starts with C. So I said, well, let's filter that out. Well, in LINQ, I would say I would add another where clause to say, well, let's make sure that the name's last name starts with C.
Right.
And then in regular old imperative style, I could do the same thing. And I couldn't figure out how to do that here. I thought, can I, what do you put here?
C with an asterisk?
I don't know. I tried a few different things. I thought, okay, well, what if I could say last name L? Then could I put a lambda expression here? And it didn't like me very much.
Nope.
Right? You can do things like this in these expressions. I can say student S, and then at least I thought I could. Am I wrong about that? Maybe I'm thinking of a different feature. I thought I could, and then I might be thinking of a different feature. But that's not where I was really trying to go with this. Is saying, so I was looking to see, like, does that mean I can only search on things that are more concrete? I don't want to say search, but pattern on things that are more concrete.
Yeah.
Maybe, and so that's kind of an open question. A question up is, is there any difference in performance between what we're doing? I will say that I'm willing to bet. I'm willing to bet that if somebody did, one of those million execution tests between LINQ and between the more traditional imperative code, I would not be shocked at all if the LINQ code came in slower.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how much slower, but that's often a performance criticism. And so then you make the decision of, do I want the code that reads this way, or do I want code, because this is pretty simple code, do I want code that maybe reads this way, but maybe I'm getting a little bit of performance? I don't know what this turns out to in compilers. I don't know if this is syntactic sugar or if there's some compiler stuff going on here. So, but there is something that you can do with this that's not, it's not that you can't do it with the other methods. It's just, it's a little bit more complicated. So let's go take a look. Remember how earlier I said that students derive from person?
Right.
Well, what if we had a different list of students? And I saved this down here because I wanted it to be a surprise. So let's get rid of var. We won't worry about var students. They're not important. What I have now is a different array, which let's see if I get a little help from Visual Studio to clean it up. No, I didn't. Well, it's valid. This is an array of persons.
Okay.
But a person could either be a student or it could be the base class person. And in the base class person, you're not getting an enrollment year. You're not getting any of that stuff, but you're still belong in here. Perfectly fine. So just as an example, earlier we had Larry Zonka. He started with C. He's a person now, not a student. So here's something I can do that's kind of neat in these patterns, is I can say, if a student is of type student, and their major is chemistry and their enrollment year is 2018, and let's forget the last name stuff because I want to see that bigger list. Then then first it makes sure that the object is of type student. Now there's a subtle bug in this code, and the subtle bug is I'm still reading from the original array. See how I say var student in students?
Right.
If I scroll back up to the top, my original array was called students. My new one's called people. So let's change this to people. Because see, I could have shown you that and it would have said, wow, he's right, except that Larry Zonka would have still shown up if I'm using the old array. So, boy, I didn't mean to scroll around like that and make everybody dizzy. So let's use the new array. So in the new array, we say, okay, let's even call this person. Let's go through the people array, and we're going to make sure that the person first is a student, and if they are a student, then we'll perform this test.
Makes sense.
But I've still got a couple bugs to work out here. One of them is that I don't even really need this one anymore. Let's create a new list. We'll say var Actually, no. We'll keep it. I need a new array because what I'm getting down here, I want to see this very clearly, is it's complaining, saying, hold on a second, even if I change this to person. So when we get our person out, it's still going to say you can't do this. And the reason why it's saying, hold on a second, I'm getting a person out that's a student, and the problem is, though, is that not all of the persons in people are students. So the compiler's complaining, it doesn't know that the line before it is guaranteeing that they're going to be a student. It doesn't know that. So it's saying, well, now hold on, I can't convert from a person to a student. So, there is one thing I could do that I think will work here. Let me leave everything alone. What if I say add person as student? Remember, the as operator can be used that way too. Now the compiler's happy because even though the line before, I know the line before is guaranteeing that you can't get into that set of curly braces unless the person was the derived class. For whatever reason, add and the compiler don't know that for sure if I don't have this here, but we do have, and this is not C#8, we do have the as operator. So let's add the person as a student, and it says, oh yeah, sure, I can do that. I can add that to a list of students. That was better than what I was going to do. I was going to say a list of person, but that doesn't, now we can demonstrate this too. So this is something cool that you can add here. Now, maybe this is what I meant to do. Yeah, I think this is what I meant earlier. So, oh no, maybe not. It's still complaining. No, still complaining. Okay. Different C# feature, shouldn't be confusing it. Let's run it. And when we run, oh, except that I've got that blank. Okay. When we run, we now only get, in our C#8 for each style filter, we only get the people in that list who were also students. So they had to be a student, therefore had a major in a chemistry year and a major in a chemistry year. And back up top, one of the people that I messed them up on purpose was this Larry Zonka character, right? He's not going to show up anymore.
Right.
So one more thing I want to try, and let's see if this works, is let me go take Frank Cranston there. Frank Cranston, see, there's no requirement that there needs to be an enrollment year for him to be a valid student. The class isn't enforcing that because I'm using the object property initializer. I'm not using a constructor that might enforce, that there has to be an enrollment years. In fact, there is no constructor, so I get the default constructor. Did you write your code that way? That's like a whole other show, right?
Right.
But in this case, now I've got Frank Cranston who doesn't have an enrollment year. So kind of seems like this should be bad. I've got my fingers crossed that this is still going to work. Because what I believe we're going to find, unless we get a no reference exception, is that these patterns automatically take care of null for you. So enrollment year for Frank Cranston is null. The program did not crash. This pattern said, is the person a student? Yes. Do they have a major of chemistry? Yes. Do they have an enrollment year of 2018? Null isn't 2018. I didn't blow up.
Right.
In other types of code, if you just trying to interrogate enrollment year would blow up unless you used null coalescing operators or what we call the Elvis operator or something like that. So kind of neat that you get that, but that's behavior you should be aware of, is that it will filter out what you maybe you did want it. Maybe your behaviors you did want it. Maybe it isn't. But in this case, now that I've made him, he's still a valid student, but for the purposes of that pattern match, it's not what we want anymore. So that's patterns. Pattern matching is that's one use of patterns, I should say. And I was specifically recursive patterns and these patterns that you could use in in a test. It's really not the only type of pattern in C#8. C#8, this great blog post, Do More with Patterns, really goes into a lot of other things. And I think in other episodes, we might take a look at some of the cool stuff in switch expressions and property patterns, positional patterns. But I just thought, a couple minutes there, take a look at that feature. And I think that's going to be a great lead into Scott K's C#8 talk, which was at Code Camp. So if you were here at Code Camp, you got to see, if you were here watching us live, you got to see his C#8 talk, which was fantastic. It was comprehensive. It was wonderful. And all of our talks from Code Camp, we have slowly but surely been getting them edited so that they can get up on the youtube.com site. And this one is not up there yet. But it is going to be up there in just a matter of moments.
You're going to press the big red button.
It's public. And so now introducing C#8, probably with a refresh or two, is on the Philly.net site, YouTube, and it's ready to go. So check this out. This was fantastic. He went over every feature in C#8 with good examples, and really I took 5 minutes that I saw out of there and said, hey, let's look at these recursive patterns and positional patterns. Pretty cool stuff.
And that's just one of the things Scott was able to go through when he did his session. Yeah,
it's in there, along with in a previous one of our shows we did what's called nullable references.
Yeah.
Which I think is a strange term when it's really about programming without null. That's what I think.
And there was something Andy called it too, wasn't it? That he had some kind of the real name for that feature.
Yeah,
and I'm blanking on what it is.
It's still being called nullable references. If I look in the building C#8 blog, nullable reference type. But I feel like the feature is really about programming without null and having the compiler help you.
Right.
Say, hey, this code could possibly be null, and so now it's an error. We talked about that in a previous episode. That's covered in here. So are things like ranges. So are things like switch expressions. A lot of cool stuff. So, I purposely pushed the boundaries in the demo. Mm-hmm. And as I was working with it, I said, oh, and there's something I would like to know is what if I was in this case where I said, well, hold on a second, I want to work on a name and I want to work on the last name and I want this to be an expression. I want to say, I'm not saying this is how the code would look, because just a few lines up, I was able to say last name starts with C, and that's how I was able to filter it out in both the if style, the for each if style, or in the LINQ style. Can you do something like that? Maybe, and and if we figure it out, we'll bring it back to the show. So we got a question that said, so here's something, what happens if you ask for enrollment year 2018? If it's null, would the value appear? Let me make sure I have the question right using these patterns. It's in order to match here, that student, that object has to have a value enrollment year set to 2018. What happens?
He's saying not equal to 2018.
What happens if you ask for enrollment year?
Yeah, you can't see it on the.
Oh, the not equal didn't show up.
Yeah.
Okay. So, that's similar to what I'm thinking about with the expressions, right?
Yeah.
Is I want an expression that says I'm not this.
And that seems to blow up.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll have to take a look at this some more. I think, certainly something that could be asked on GitHub. Just go right to the language feature on the GitHub C# design GitHub repo and say, hey, how could I use this with expressions? Be curious what they say, or maybe there's already an issue opened. I don't know. So just something to look at there. C#8's live. And then along with that, we've got the ASP.NET Core tonight, and then we've been working on our project there. So
yeah, we still have that in the queue to come back to.
Yeah,
for one of these shows.
Yeah, if you were here last week, we started an ASP.NET project and we used Azure DevOps to build it. Mm-hmm. And that was it. That was all we did. And we thought it would take us like 15 minutes. And what else are we going to talk about the rest of the time? And it turns out we ran into some issues, which was good. I'm glad we ran into them because I think it was nice I actually feel like I got a better understanding of how it works by actually working through the YAML there. So
yeah, and that's what they say, learning from all your failures. Success don't really teach you that much, right?
Right. you ask for 2018, if you ask for not 2018, it also skips nulls, at least in SQL. That's probably true. Probably.
And this is all still new features, right? So there's little documentation that we're kind of playing around and seeing what it does.
Yeah. Well, in SQL select queries, it's always been a little different about the behavior of null. I mean, so what we're getting from the chat is that if that nulls don't match, they not only don't match 2018 in SQL, they would also, I think what he's saying is they would also match not 2018. And I think I got to admit that sometimes my SQLs and T-SQL is a little rusty, but I think that's correct. And it's because null behavior is a little different in SQL than maybe we're used to in C# or VB or a language like that, or take your pick. I wonder if even that's a setting, because one of the things about SQL that a lot of folks don't know is that you can change the behavior of your SQL server just by changing some database options like collation. We're used to, I think we're used to strings in SQL Server have to match exactly, but you could change that. You could build your database and say, oh, no, I want strings to be case insensitive. And then you'd confuse every .NET developer ever because, you'd be the one database that changed any of those settings.
They wouldn't understand why the code wasn't working.
Yeah. But he'd say, you can do that? I didn't know you could do that. That's crazy. So, no, it's definitely interesting stuff. So we also had, just last weekend, we had a global Azure Bootcamp here.
Yeah.
And I think that was streamed.
That was.
Working on the recordings.
So we are working on the individual recordings, but the actual stream itself is still up.
Yep.
People are still looking at it, and it's. I decided instead of pulling it down to leave it there because it's pretty much been top of the list the last most of the week anyway.
Right.
Since we're not a full week into it, but so that's still up there. Although I am going to break that apart into separate videos so we have it.
Yeah.
A little more consumable and a little more promotable too.
Right, and I think that makes sense. I don't mind. I think having the unedited is great, and then breaking it down so people can say, "Well, I just want to watch this," or if you see just Global Azure Bootcamp and you don't look at the description, and if we don't put the time codes in there, you don't know what's going on, right?
Yeah.
So, but I do remember the first session of the day was again, it was Bill Wolf talking about basically both serverless and schemaless with so you're looking at Azure Functions and Cosmos DB.
Yeah.
And one of the best overviews I have seen on that topic, both of those topics, I was watching it going like, this is a really great explanation. Some of it I already knew, a lot of it I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt like I really got a lot out of that. And then you presented.
Yeah. So I presented on Azure DevOps and gave a run through the various features that are there, talking, actually looking a little bit at some of the stuff that we started to do in that session, the Affiliate Tech Talk session we did a couple weeks ago. Just kind of starting there a little bit and going off into some of the pipeline stuff and some of the other projects we have that show that off. So that was a lot of fun. A lot of good questions out of that. And then we ended up doing a session on something that's kind of related. We think of DevOps being just getting code and pushing code out into wherever it's going to live. And once it's there, you need to do some understanding of what's happening out there and doing some telemetry and some insights into that. And we had a great session after mine around App Insights and using that tool to be able to get telemetry on your app that's out in production. So that was really awesome. And then what finished up the day was something that kind of called back to Bill's session at the beginning around serverless and Cosmo with Tim Ferrer doing his Azure Patterns talk. So not a little bit of looking at the technology, but also talking about how you can hook those pieces together to address some of the architecture and application concerns you might have starting to architect the cloud.
Yeah, I mean, and you go to that Azure portal and you just see the huge list of things. I like how, Tim kind of says, okay, here's how to make some sense of it and maybe get something done using these services, which is a real challenge. And that's what I think we're going to try to do later as we continue with that demo project. So I would love to, as we continue, I want to keep doing the bite-sized things with C# 8 as well. And actually, what I've realized as I've been looking at C# 8 is that we actually may find ourselves backing into C#7 and even C#6 features, because there's a lot of those features that I still don't think a lot of developers are using.
Yeah.
And so I hope that we can also, if we get some other folks and guests on, one thing I did want to talk about is that how easy is it to bring in these new language features? I think, maybe in your role today, it's not what it once was, but we've both worked at a lot of different places.
Mm-hmm.
And have you ever thought of a time or a difficulty when you've wanted to use a new language feature? I mean, we can go back to LINQ if you want.
Sure.
And everyone else said, "Oh my gosh, I hate it. Don't use it. Quit it. What are you doing?"
Yeah. And there was some of that probably about 3 or 4 years ago with Entity Framework.
Okay.
And using that as a way of interacting with data and being able to do the code first model for databases.
Right.
And the challenges that presented as you updated the databases and how you had to keep all that in sync. So yeah, I think there were certainly some benefits to it, but there are a little bit of challenges and pain points in getting everybody rallied around doing that for the first time.
Yeah, and Entity Framework code first was so divisive because it came last.
Mm-hmm.
We got Entity Framework database first and model first very quickly, very early in the Entity Framework lifetime.
Yeah, with those projects that let you do that, right? If I remember.
Yeah, well, I mean, from the very beginning, you could say to Entity Framework, "Hey, here's my database," and it would generate your code.
Right.
Or you could say, "Well, I don't have a database yet. I'm going to model." I think those were called EDMX files, maybe. I could be wrong. And then it would generate your code.
Yep.
And that's what came out first. But we always, from very early on, we had heard, "Hey, code first is coming. Code first is coming." And I think that was a response to some other ORMs that were code first.
Mm-hmm.
And so it finally showed up. And there was just this, I remember this division of especially if you were very much a SQL, if you were a DBA or a database developer, you looked at that and said, "You've got to be kidding me that this C# code is going to build my database and set up my relationships." And even as a C# developer, I often struggled. I'm the kind of person that I sort of understood a relational database schema a little bit. I certainly wanted an expert to really polish it up. And I kept finding myself trying to translate, saying, "Okay, well, I want a one-to-many relationship. How do I do that again? What is the magic?" And you use keywords like virtual and in new ways, in order to make those things happen. And I remember struggling a lot with many-to-many relationships. How do I get those working in code first? Code first was, and I don't want to say was, it's still very popular.
Sure.
Not just in EF6, but in EF4. But what an interesting time that was to decide, how do I want to do this? Do I want to use the new migration stuff? Or again, are the DBAs or the people who manage database going to come along and say, "No way, you're not doing that here"?
Yeah. And I was kind of lucky because it was a small project where we didn't have the DBA oversight.
Oh, yeah.
So we were able to, as developers, that was how we saw the code and how we saw built it. So it made sense.
Yeah, so I actually want to make sure I read this comment. As a SQL guy, "You've got to be kidding me" is a much more polite version of my words when I saw EF. And I'm not surprised to hear that. Very common. Plenty of developers. I think the more you knew about SQL, T-SQL, maybe the more you had to live in that world, which I did.
Yeah.
I just touched enough of it. I started to worry about like an impedance mismatch. But again, I think it's developers. Often we're trying to figure out, can we turn everything into code that we commit?
Yeah.
Because for the longest time it has been, I'm not going to say it is today, because that would be totally unfair, to take a SQL database and try to turn that into something source controllable is a hard thing. It still is. And I think there's a reason for that. Part of what makes it so hard is that we have, as developers who write maybe code like C# or VB that turns into assemblies, we have this wonderful advantage. If we make a code change, I know the world changes all the time, but technically speaking, we can delete the assemblies that are out there as if they never existed, poof, and put in some new assemblies, some new DLLs and XEs, and we're on our way.
Yeah.
And you can't do that with the database. The data is important. It's a migration. It's not a replacement.
Yep. And, we haven't gotten into this, maybe something to explore when we do the DevOps discussion, is a lot of the conversation around code for DevOps is, hey, we can deploy quickly. Once your code is there, maybe you deploy it to a secondary slot, warm it up, get it ready to go. And then when you say, hey, this is good, hit the magic button, and that becomes production, and production falls back to that staging slot. And if you run into an issue, you can always revert and give you that comfort that you can deploy more quickly. And then the question inevitably comes back to, well, what about the data?
Yep.
And then, you're kind of stuck. So either there are third-party tools you can use to manage your database and your structure, but some of the other conversations we've had with people from the DevOps world who are giving this guidance around this, well, from a database perspective, you always continue to fail forward. And you make sure that your code is resilient enough that if you make a change to the database and you have to fall back, you've still got that resiliency that it's not going to, that you can kind of ignore those additional fields that are there, or ignore some of those features that might be doing things from a data perspective. So that starts the conversation around feature flags and things of that, and having code start to percolate into the production environment, but not visible and ready until you're ready to flip that switch and turn that feature on.
Okay, so you're talking about code being able to handle a database migration succeeding or not succeeding.
And being in a state that may contain additional information or additional things that you're not ready to look at yet.
Okay. So that's really interesting too, is because I don't know enough about this to speak authoritatively on it, but rolling back code is also much easier than rolling back a database.
No doubt. And I completely agree with you. And that's where the conversation was, don't roll back the database.
Sure.
Have it in such a way that, and I've been on projects in the past where we've done that. You have scripts that would create new columns in your database or do those things or move into staging. And if you hit an issue in production, in your deployment, I should say, then you had rollback scripts that would basically undo all those column adds or undo all those table adds and kind of revert the database back to what it previously was. And what they're saying is, put it in such a way that you don't fall back. It's always moving the database forward.
Yeah.
You've got things in place
to
do that.
And I think we're getting some of that feedback now. Some of it, the equipment's in the way. I don't know if you want to read it, but I'm seeing some feedback here.
Yeah, so basically saying, and unfortunately I put it on the screen behind me, but developers are a lot more agile in needing a database or a DBA wants a ton of planning, right? Which, as we've run into in building out our app, it's often a huge bottleneck for developers who are just wanting to test things.
Yeah,
and
true.
Databases aren't the only places we run into those kind of bottlenecks, right? From testing things rolled out. Rolling back my database is definitely going to be, it's definitely going to cost you a steak dinner.
I mean, database changes can happen for a lot of reasons. It could be adding new fields, sure. It could be that it's time for a schema change because we know more about our business domain than we did before.
Yep.
And somebody who really understands, or heck, we know more about how our data is being read than it was before. And so we need faster reads or faster writes that we weren't getting before. So let's change the database. Okay. Well, the code is what really needs to be more resilient because, going back not only sounds like a nightmare, it's downright impossible sometimes. You might have done some data manipulation that really, and I remember Entity Framework had a migration up and a migration down. Did you ever use the migration down? Because I don't think I ever did. I'm not even sure if it really would work in all cases.
No, I don't. I think the one time I had to do a migration down was because of just trying to coalesce a couple of different migrations that I kind of gotten out of sync. And I'm trying to get them back to some base level and then move them forward.
Right. Well, the data lives forever. The code change, but we get some inklings of this in other places too. As we move more towards our code being maybe either microservices or service based, and we're not writing a web app that everything's happening on the web server.
Right.
If I'm calling out to an API, I got to be resilient. If I'm the API, I've got to, on the one hand, I got to be resilient to the fact that I might get some callers that don't upgrade. ever.
Right.
I exposed some new endpoints, and that doesn't mean everyone's going to update. So we see all these strategies in the web API land to try and deal with that.
Unless you force them that you're going to deprecate those services, and some of the services that we talk to put us through that process of making sure that we update. And then when you talk about microservices, the data and the code of that service is supposed to essentially updatable and deployable all in and of itself. So as you make those updates, you're moving the data forward too, as opposed to data sit outside of that.
Yeah, so I think when we have other folks on, I will be I'm excited to ask them about specific C# features and whether they've adopted them or whether they like them. Like, I can't wait to have somebody on and say, okay, so let's talk about var and just see what kind of fires break out. Or one that, here's something you don't see anymore.
What's that?
You remember when .NET 3 was brand new and we were being introduced to LINQ. And so today I used LINQ. I used method syntax.
Describe method.
Which to describe method syntax. I gotta get my system going again. I don't know if it's gonna come up for you really quick there, but maybe.
So method being .where,
.where, .select
method into that.
But that's not how we were introduced to LINQ.
No.
I remember they were up on stage. It might have even been a PDC. They might not even called it build yet. And we were introduced to LINQ with what's called query syntax, where there were keywords in the C# language.
Sure.
And for the longest time, LINQ was database connection. LINQ was calling the database. That's what it was. And it took like some time to get away from it to say, no. LINQ is operations over collections. And I took that journey myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the past, where I would have used query syntax, which is that whole from, where, C# looking stuff, I don't anymore.
No.
I use method syntax, and I'm not sure that I see a whole lot of query syntax in the wild anymore. So, if you're not old enough, you might have no idea what I'm talking about. Because,
right.
But I remember that's how we were introduced to it. And for a very long time, including myself, a lot of people felt like, well, LINQ is a database thing, right? And it's like, well, that's not it at all. LINQ is, a language integrated query over any kind of collection. And it actually doesn't even have to really be collections.
Right.
But certainly you need it implemented for it. So it's implemented for collections. It's implemented for databases. And I think implemented for some other things too. But I think it'd be interesting to ask people questions like that. Like, so, hey, do you see query syntax anymore? We'll bring it up on screen. Do you see this anymore?
Recognize this?
Yeah. Does this even look familiar? Or JavaScript calls them arrow functions. We call them Lambda expressions, and they're not the same thing. That would be totally unfair to say that they're identical. But the arrow syntax, which I've really come to appreciate as a shorthand way of just describing a function, which is also not probably exactly right, but I've come to really like that. And so I'm a big fan of like some other features where you get to keep, it's not even about terseness, it's about keeping to expressions over iterative code. And so we'll have to come up with some examples for stuff like that, and then let people in the audience tell us if they like it or not. I mean, we're not, they don't, that's fine.
The one that old school that I keep pulling out, I think it's like 2010, 2012-ish, but paste JSON is class.
Oh gosh, paste JSON is classes. That's right. I pull
that out every so often. People are like, "What is that? Where has that been?" It's been there forever.
And it's been in a long time.
Yeah.
But the first time somebody sees it, they go, "What?"
Yeah.
So, gosh, is that easy to do? If I say a new file, and I say that I want it to be JSON.
Wait, we're not seeing
that. We'll have to switch it over. So I'm here in just Visual Studio Code.
I don't know that it'll do it in code.
But what I could do is I can make JSON in code pretty quickly, and then we can go see if I can paste it as a class. I don't know. I don't remember. Was it easy?
Oh, it's as long as you have a JSON file, yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't see whatever screen you're working on. Either it froze or...
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, it might have froze again. We'll save that for another time. Paste JSON as classes. That's a show that we'll have to do. So, So, anyways, yeah, let's see what is here. Sounds like a really good talk to see who's. It's fortunately I've got some equipment in my way.
Let's see. Sounds like a really good talk to see who's using C# features that have
Yeah,
been around for a long
right.
time. Yeah.
And which ones have fallen to the wayside? Because certainly some have. Like, I'll tell you what has is before we had generic, the collections that were not generic, the non-generic list and object collections, those things are off. Don't ever use those. But we needed to wait for .NET 2.0 to get to where the nicer syntax that we have today.
Yeah.
So what else? What else do we have? We know that I know I have it up on my screen, but we can probably get to the meetup site in 2 weeks. Jeff Fritz is here for our in-person meetup on May 15th.
I saw him lurking in the chat earlier.
Yep. What's happening with Visual Studio 2019. So he'll be here to take the entire time and give us a good update about what's happening. I think not just with Visual Studio 2019, but with .NET and ASP.NET in general. It will be an Ask Me Anything format, I'm sure, if I know Jeff.
Yep.
So that is one where we definitely would love to see some audience questions, and we will rapid fire them at Jeff. We're gonna have to keep that microphone moving around the room because that will definitely be interactive.
Yep, and it's the week after Build.
Yeah.
So you've got all those great announcements that are coming out. Build being our Microsoft Developers Conference coming up 6th, 7th, and 8th of May.
Yep.
With the keynotes, and then certain sessions will be streamed day of, and then look for a whole bunch of sessions to usually appear like 28 or 24, 48 hours after that. But basically, that's a chance to come and bring those questions and hear about all the new things that we talked about, and ask Jeff to kind of go in a little more detail if you have questions around those.
Oh, I see what happened is I went off. So that explains why.
That'll do it.
Yeah, that'll do it every time. I just want to see, because a couple other things that are coming up around Build, that's going to be a great chance to talk about Build. Another one is that the next Philly Azure meetup, which is not listed here, but I know that it's a Build meetup.
It's a post-Build discussion, and that's going to be May 21st.
We've all got to wait for Build to find out what we're going to put in the Philly Azure meetup.
Yeah.
And so
the date is definitely May 21st. Yeah,
May 21st, and then we've got a couple great shows, and then when I think Rich and I will be back here next week. So that's during the heart of Build.
Yeah.
So
that'll be right as Build finishes up, because that's the 8th.
Yeah.
That we come back. And what's interesting then is, let me see if I can swing this over. Yeah. So up here is we also have a list of events. So coming up on that day, the 8th, we have Philly Tech Week, and so that's from May 3rd to May 11th is the full series of events that they're doing. But we are doing an event out here in Malvern, so just in the western suburbs of Philly. But a chance to come out here and do a number of hackathons. We're doing a DevOps hack. We're doing a modern workplace hack with teams and building app teams, as well as building Power Apps and putting some AI against those things, as well as a number of sessions. So chance to hit that aka.ms link /Philly Tech Week to go out there and register for that. And we'd love to come out and see you guys here. Hold that one up there. I'll come back to that one in a second, Chris. The May 17th is Azure Data Fest. That's a day-long session to come out and hear about some great data topics related to Azure, and we will be live streaming that over our Philly.net channel. So we'll have that seen here. And finally, if you're interested in Dynamics, by Dynamics, but it's a very important platform when you think about some of the services that we have across the Microsoft services of Azure, Dynamics, and Office. And there's a lot of great tie-ins to the Azure platform when we start thinking about how to integrate data across all of those surfaces. So Dynamics is a very important product. If you're doing anything Power App or Microsoft Flow, that's a great time to come out and hear some more of those topics and see how they all intertwine together. And turn it back over to Chris real quick, because he's got something that's coming up.
Yeah, and this is thanks to the chat. Skull Crusher for Life has been watching us all night on Twitch, thank you for evangelizing our user group on Twitch. I know that you are always in there helping out people. If we're a split second late on answering a question, he's right there. And he brought to our attention, I'd forgotten about the SQL Saturday is this weekend. SQL Saturday Philly going to be at Montgomery County Community College, so out in Bluebell. I mean, we're not going to be there with the Philly.net channel, but it is a fantastic event. So if you're in the Philly area, still time to register this weekend. And I mean, we can even take a quick glimpse of the sessions.
So I know the one session that's in there.
Yeah.
Bill is doing his Cosmo DB talk there.
Yep.
All completely Cosmo DB.
Right, and it's listed. Intro to Cosmos DB is listed in their little session glimpse, and also another talk we had at Code Camp, Advanced Indexing for Accidental DBAs with Sebastian, and I want to get Sebastian here to either talk on the show or maybe have him repeat that for Philly.net, because that's one I'm really interested in, is hearing. I totally understand where he's getting at. Accidental DBA. I've been there. I've done it with varying levels of success. So thank you for bringing that up. This is a community show. We're not here to just concentrate on what we're doing or even really the Philly area. So, as time goes by, we're definitely, I think, reaching out to folks and seeing about getting folks outside our area too. So we'll get there. But there's a lot of really cool stuff. Look at here at this is building your first SQL Server container lab in Docker. Black belt for DBA with advanced technologies. This is really, really cool. So yeah, SQL Saturday this weekend. All right. So I'm going to put 2 blog posts in the chat. It's going to be the Building C#8 blog post from last November, and then a more in-depth one from, I just want to see when it was from, January 2019, Do More with Patterns in C#8. So we will get those on our YouTube replay description. We've got a quick C# demo. The C#8 talk is up. We will have more talks from Code Camp going up as soon as we get them edited and posted, and we'll make sure to let people know here too. So I think that's what do you think, Rich? Pretty good tonight?
That's awesome. Yeah.
Awesome.
Great, a lot of great topics and a lot of great discussions. So
thanks for sticking with us. And if you're watching us live, thanks you once again. And even if you're watching us on replay, thank you for joining us. Make sure to comment in the video description. Let us know what you like or what you'd like to see. If you like this video, then we'll know this is the kind of content you want to see. And if you want to see everything that's going on at the Philly.net channel on YouTube at youtube.com/PhillyDotNet, then hit that subscribe button. We saw we had 500 subscribers coming in tonight. Maybe we've got our 501st, or maybe you are, who knows, by the time you see this, maybe you're our 600, 700 subscriber. We'll see. But thanks again for sticking with us, and hope you had a good time. And I'm Chris Gomez. We had Rich behind the camera, and we will see you next week.
Good night, guys.